Good day to our viewing audience. This is David Lawrence, Interim Superintendent of Dayton Public Schools, and we're here at DPS, The Next Level, our weekly podcast with 7 other principals sitting with me. And before I introduce them or have them introduce themselves, I want to let everybody know that every week I'm usually rocking a school t-shirt. This time I decided to go with operations. Those is the guys I used to work with and ladies, and I am rocking this shirt for you. So that's custodians, nutrition services, grounds and facilities, plumbers, electricians, glazers, all the people that do all the things that we don't see. They're outside the classrooms to keep our buildings going. So let us start with our introductions.
Hello, everyone. This is Lisa Miner, Associate Superintendent.
Hi, I'm Sharon Goins, Director of Equity.
Hi, Judy Spurlock, Interim Chief of Elementary.
Erin Dooley, Chief of Secondary Schools.
Hi, Mindy Clark, Director of Accountability and Assessment.
Akeisha Sheehy, Chief Academic Officer.
My name is Marvin Jones, Executive Director of HR.
So today's topic is really a serious one. We always find time to laugh in this one. We may in this one, but it's pretty serious. And full disclosure has been brought on by the week that we've had this week as administrators. I think I led by saying that there are 7 principals in here. I make 8. And the people in this room, we have a certain superpower that all principals in Ohio and probably the nation have by virtue of their licensure, the power to remove kids from school. They're called suspensions, and that's kind of the title of today's episode, suspensions. The ultimate power move, the removal of a child from school, the ultimate power move. And I just want to start off with a little bit of data around our own school district from last year and where we're headed this year, and then we'll start the conversation. So last year we had a total of 21,400 suspension days lost to suspension, 21,430 days lost to suspension. So just imagine in this district with about 12,500 kids, that would be like every kid in the district being suspended about 1 3/4 times. Just imagine nobody being at school tomorrow or Monday, because we suspended everybody, or Tuesday. And so we're on track this year to exceed those numbers. So this podcast could not come at a more apropos time. And so I'll just put the first question out there. Why suspend? Why should we suspend kids? Why?
Personally, I don't believe in suspension because it's not an intervention. It does not teach, and our role is to teach. If we suspend a student outside of a safety concern, I think that we are doing an injustice because, again, we're not teaching. We need to take opportunities to teach behavior and replace the behaviors that are not appropriate for school.
I should probably ask this question to Ms. Sheehy, who I take credit for it every time I can. I was her supervisor when she got her first job, and I was responsible with Lisa Miner for her promotion, and she was awesome. Do you think it matters if it's elementary, middle, or school, or a high school?
I do. Me and high school have a relationship. I don't think the nurturing happens in high school the way that it should. I don't think the relationships are in high school the way that it should be to provide environments that are supportive of children. And so in high school, I think it's even more critical that we find intervention to keep students in school because, we're talking about the graduation, we're talking about the content, we're talking about the social skills. So I think it's even more important in high school.
Yeah, I've heard it stated, so I'll kind of piggyback that comment. The the most effective or the most successful high schools look, sound, and feel like elementaries. I think what tends to happen as you go higher in the grade levels, the adults may look at students like they're grown and they should know better. And they're a bit more reluctant to really build those relationships and model the behaviors necessary for the students to respond in the right way, in the right kind of way.
I think you said something that's really, really important, because me going to a different type of environment from an urban district, a large urban district, we tend to treat our children as adults.
Adultification of kids, especially girls.
Yes, we do not allow them to be children. And so in the elementary and in high school, because they're still children that need to be taught.
Mm-hmm. And one of the overused, I'm sure, one of the overused causes for suspension in high school would be insubordination or repeated violence. That's a catch-all. But I beg to differ with high schools. I beg to differ with the misbehaviors. Kids rarely tear up places where they know that people care about them, where they know that these people see me and see me having a future, where we are celebrating them, even their progression or even their improvement, where there are opportunities to be validated, where there's family, where there's community. And so high schools can mirror that, and they don't always feel and sound like elementary schools. And there were, if you came up the hill, there were stretches of periods. Now they tour at McDonald's and they go back behind Wow, but they didn't fight at Thurgood. They didn't fight at school. And I think it was convocations. I think the teachers giving those kids awards, science fair, natural history day, they had so much to look forward to. Our dances were off-site. You had to go, we spent a lot of money to celebrate and have really special experiences. And I just think that factors in for high schoolers. They don't tear up what they see as a part of them or extension of them.
And I would agree. My first year at Thurgood, we were coming off the pandemic, so students had been out of school for like a year and a half. A lot of the programming that was in place when you were there, Dr. Lawrence, when you, Ms. Goins, just didn't exist.
Programming and staff.
Right, programming and staff. And so it blew my mind how the Thurgood of old was not the Thurgood of old, Teachers would complain about the building being stripped down, lack of programming. There was a lot of turnover in terms of teachers. And then, again, coming off that pandemic, I think students had too much time on their hands to delve into social media, and to get into nefarious behaviors. And it just came into the building. I mean, I hate saying, gangs, but 4 or 5 different cliques.
But there was some other infrastructural things that you inherited that if certain people had been in place,
Right.
they wouldn't have all ended up in one spot. We know that.
Yeah, that first year was rough. And we did suspend a lot of students that first semester. There were gang fights. But in that second year, I'll say second semester, and I know a lot of people may not be on the same page in terms of phones, but we took phones just to take away their ability to coordinate nefarious behaviors. Every fight could be traced back to a Snapchat or an Instagram post about a fight in the neighborhood. We're going to be in the restroom, third period, fourth period, after lunch, or after school. They're calling people up to the school, after school, and it was just crazy. But we did put some more programming in place that second year, and I think that the drop in terms of referrals and fights could be contributed to, students feeling like they're
vested.
they're vested, and we had a family type atmosphere. That was our That was our aim. We wanted to create a family type atmosphere, and it was needed. 35% of our students were students that lived in group homes.
Yes.
I think
Ms. Dooley, what are some alternatives to suspension?
There's an infinite number of alternatives to suspension. I was just making some notes about, there's different categories of offenses, and yes, our code of conduct is divided up by levels, but if a school could separate those behaviors that are violent or a violation of law, that's one category. But most of the categories are things that can be addressed in other ways. I know back when I was an assistant principal at Kaiser Middle School, Willie Terrell and I used to have Saturday school. And we had 35 to 50 kids, and they showed up religiously. And Mr. Terrell would do proficiency prep with them. And that was a great opportunity to build relationships with kids. Those who couldn't sit for 3 hours, we would get trash bags and brooms and gloves, and we'd go clean up the grounds together. Alternative, I'm a big proponent of community service. I know 1 year as a principal, I said I ordered 10 brooms and 10 rakes and 10 pairs of gloves, and I just got ready for the next round of kids who were going to clean up that school. And there are opportunities through community service where kids can heal relationships with each other, with adults. I think conferences between teachers and kids and the principal can be very healing, so that whatever conflict is happening in the classroom can be addressed before the child returns to the classroom. But what I wrote down in my notes was, we as adults also have to help kids settle their disputes with each other. We have a generation of kids who everything is by phone with abbreviated words, and a lot of misunderstandings are happening constantly. And things escalate and blow up over things that kids sometimes can't even tell you what's wrong. So adults who intervene early and put the kids at the table, and, a restorative circle, or even just a conversation. As I used to always say, just try to get in front of that stuff. When you see things we all know when things aren't right, to get in front of it, prevent it, be preventative. But tons of alternatives.
I'm glad you mentioned the alternatives, and I'll go back to Ms. Sheehy's first statement. Suspension is not an intervention, and when we know the negative effects of suspension. We're all educators. We're responsible to lead learning environments, true learning organizations. And what are they learning when they're constantly pushed out? And we know what the research says. They end up in prison. That is a school to prison pipeline when you're constantly suspending. There's now research and evidence to show that. So it's a crime that we're doing when we're constantly suspending. And we have to, it's a moral obligation that we have, if we call ourselves educators, to think of another way, to be creative. And Ms. Dooley just named several from years back that she did. So it's not that difficult, and it is a way to form relationships. I worked at a school where 80% of the kids there have been expelled. And so the whole population were gang members or at risk or girl fights and all of that. And implementing those practices, whether it's solid PBIS, and this was ages 16 to 21, so they were like almost adults. And yes, they did change. Yes, I did have gang members say to me, I knew there was going to be a fight because I always knew. And they said, and I'd go up to them and say, what's going on? And they said, we're not going to fight here. And it was because of what Ms. Goen shared about setting a climate and a culture where they felt belonged, they felt loved, and they weren't going to tear up their school. Now, I had to work on what they do outside of school, and that was a big challenge. But in the school, after the climate was set, they didn't do it. Now, had I had a punitive mindset, And Phil Schlechte describes it like a learning organization where a principal is a leader of leaders, not a warden. Is your school a prison?
Yeah.
Or is your school a school?
So that's
This
huge.
is philosophical
Perception.
and political.
Perception of what strong leadership is.
But the
Yeah.
action, as in not an intervention. I was a principal and I did suspend, not as much as I'm seeing these numbers now,
Right.
but it's political and it's philosophical in terms of what is the role of school.
Yep.
Is school about punishment?
Yes.
Or is it about changing behaviors?
Look.
And that would be my pushback. They should be put out. They're coming back. So are we going to, they coming back.
coming back, right.
They coming back.
We push them back
so
to the
are
areas
we going
where
to
they
deal
learn.
with the behavior before? Now we
Yep.
might give them a little, but a whole lot of talking. You remember one time Dr. Lawrence came in our office and said we in there crying with the kids and we had another, I don't want to suspend you, but he gonna get you. If I don't suspend you, the principal's I was these kids' teacher and he was Miss Spurlock and Miss Goins, y'all in there crying with the kids. Y'all don't want to suspend them.
It's true. They did a whole bunch of talking and crying with them kids. I said, how many days they get? And they both start crying. None. They didn't get any. They didn't get any, David. They got to crying.
They gonna be better. They gonna
And
get it
Doc,
together.
and that's,
Students make mistakes. And
Adults make mistakes.
adult makes mistakes too. But if we don't teach them how to go back and correct, because it's like throwing a rock into a lake, it has ripples. Their behavior has ripples on other people. And if we don't teach them how to handle their emotions with words rather than actions the appropriate way, then they'll think that what they do has no consequences. And the consequences are relationships. That's the bottom line. And how do you make changes in yourself so that you can handle situations appropriately? Because these are life lessons. They don't just start in elementary and middle and high school. We're preparing them for life. And we have to know that what they do affects other people and affects themselves and their future, because we have to help them deal with situations appropriately and make sure that they know. And when they make a mistake, just like adults need to model, we need to help them with solutions on how to dig themselves out of that, to rectify, so next time they don't make that same mistake. That's our job.
Mindy, you haven't said anything about the power to put kids out. We all have a principal's license in here. Gives us, everybody here has a principal's license. That's the price of admittance to this room. Principal's license.
So I go back and I think about, when I was doing lunch detention at Stivers and that orange bench.
The bench.
The bench.
The bench was powerful.
The bench was powerful. And whether I was sitting on the bench with a kid and just having the conversation about, what had happened, why it had happened, and, how to change it. Or, when I was at Ponence and had kids in my office, what are we going to do different? How do you solve this problem? Or just giving a kid time and space to wait, to calm their emotions, so then we could have a conversation. Because sometimes, when you think about it, even as adults, sometimes we all get so amped up and there's so much energy flowing that we're not thinking, and we all just need just a minute just to relax. And sometimes kids just need that minute, because guess what? They're kids. And we need to teach kids, just like everybody else has said, we need to teach kids and model for kids. It's okay to take a minute before you respond to something, and to figure out what your best response is going to be. And so I can think of numerous kids who, I need to just go take a minute and sit down somewhere before I, do something. And they knew to come to my office. They knew to go sit in Miss Christian's office or go, but they all had a specific place.
I'm going to talk about the number of days. It's one of the hallmarks of the power to remove kids. You have the power to get an S37, 39, and 40. and you, whether you do it on the computer or in paper, you scribble in that day, and you determine how many days that child is going to be out of school. Now, Ms. Dooley did a great job, and all of you did, actually talking about all the other interventions. But when that day comes that you have to scribble that number in and say the number of days, what I'm noticing is babies being given 5 and 10 days. I mean, it's heartbreaking to watch, elementary children just arbitrarily put out because you have the power of the principal's license. So let's talk about how we come to the number of days. And they don't talk about this in principal school, by the way. So our podcast will be addressing something that we don't talk about at universities at all.
So I think about a situation when you and I were in a meeting a long time ago, and 2 elementary kids came in, and they had just, quote unquote, fought, but they were best friends. And so you had the conversation with them actually about spending the night at each other's house for 10 days instead of being suspended for 10 days.
That's a true story.
because they fought because they didn't share something or they were mad about something, but they didn't fight because of an argument that was going to make a difference. But the way to mend their relationship was actually to engage and to actually, spend the night. They were friends, and so it just disrupted their friendship, and they didn't know how to mend that friendship.
Let me ask you all this. I'm thinking, and I don't want to be the moderator today, but when kids have something to lose, does that change how they respond when someone is, making them mad, or when they, are coming to a conflict? Mm-hmm. I mean, are we giving kids hope? Are we giving them their future, that is this going to matter in a month? Is this going to matter in 3 years?
Yes.
Are we the hope brokers? Or are we extension of what society says for under-resourced, marginalized, minoritized kids that you don't matter, and I'm sick of you, and I'm not going to see you for 10? Are we feeding into what society is saying about?
That's the push out. It's almost discouraging them from wanting to be in school. I don't want to go back there. They're just going to put me out again. He doesn't like me. Every time I turn around, I'm getting suspended. And the parents are upset and everything. It's critical. Superintendent asked about the number of days. That's hard for me because I don't like to suspend it all, but if there's a safety issue, if there's a cooling off period that needs to be, I might say 2 or 3 days. Mom, can you sit with them for 2 or 3 days? Because that was very impactful. You know your families. When you know your families, certain grandmas sit up there in the classroom, she's going to change the dynamics of the whole room. And the benefit of that is they see what's really going on in the school. Then they're an advocate for the school. And the kid's embarrassed because grandma's sitting with me in lunchroom or wherever I need to go. There's all kinds of creative things to do. And it doesn't have, and never a full 10 days, unless, I think we talked about it before, some kind of serious legal action that the police would be involved. But other than that, you can work. It's a deficit. It's not a benefit to the child. And as it said before, they're going to come back. And then what are you going to do? Because you've got these bad feelings and there's no relationship building.
Right. I think I think progressive discipline is really important, and a progressive discipline plan, because you don't want to be arbitrary when you're assigning days. You don't want to be emotional about assigning days. You want fairness and equity. And so having a plan so that in the heat of the moment, you can stick with the plan, right? And the heat of the moment doesn't drive it. So, and then also you can say that I've done all that I could to keep you in school. This is what I've done. These are the interventions that I've provided you. I've done, I've had a parent phone call. I've had a parent meeting. We've had lunch detention. We've had Saturday school. Now we're moving to the next level. And I would be okay because I knew I had invested into this child before I ever thought about putting them out of school.
I want the people viewing this, and especially our folks who are in Dayton Public Schools, to process what you just said. A safety plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like not arbitrary. Not I get my pen out, fight, 10 days. Yeah, that's not a plan. That's a response.
That's
Yeah. So I've done that, but I've also put on the table, you have 10. And I'm, talking with the parents, the students, but if you agree to come in and do X, Y, Z, maybe it's a mediation or a combination of mediation, community service, a presentation, if you will, I'd rescind, 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 days, depending on how quickly, we could put a plan together to get them back in the building. And that was typically for, the fights between, multiple students. But I think giving them that opportunity to say, man, I messed up. I can get back in school a little bit earlier than 10 if I do X, Y, Z. If I agree to help make this improvement plan. But I think as like principals, something came to mind. Judy, you said change. You talked about change. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't help but think about there are some principals who move by what's politically expedient and not necessarily what's best for the kid. Mm-hmm. If I don't suspend this kid, these teachers are going to think I'm not supporting them, or they're going to think that I'm weak.
Right.
When there's true strength in being restorative and taking time to establish relationships with kids. I don't have to appease anybody. I'm comfortable in this space, vibing with this kid, trying to help this kid, pour into this kid. So
giving them the ability
just
to
having
fix
the
it.
courage, yeah.
My thing is you got to noon and make it right. So giving them the tools and the ability to go fix it.
Exactly.
You got to noon.
Yep.
And if I don't get an email or a text from the teacher, buddy, it's adios amigos.
Yeah.
And so but we gave them opportunities, and we've got to give them tools. They don't always have the tools.
Exactly.
Bro,
Exactly.
like you were going to say something.
And I think it's, even if I had to suspend, I'd be like, I'm still checking on you. So I might give them a call every day. What are you doing today? Okay, I can't wait till you come back.
Wow.
When you come back, how are you filling out that success plan? Because on your day one, we're going to review your success plan so this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And so it's about that, even though sometimes you have to take some action.
You do.
But how do we do that? And are we still having a relationship? Like, I'm doing this, but I care about you. I have a plan for you to be successful. We're going to work together when you come back, and we're going to move forward on this. I've also been in situations where I made a mistake as an administrator.
Yeah.
And I've had to call a parent and say, you know what?
Change it.
I was wrong. I got to rescind a decision.
Ms. Dooley, can you add something to that? 'Cause I saw you shake your head. We've been together in these moments,
Yeah.
you and I.
No, I've had to do that many, many times because sometimes the adult needs to calm down, and in many situations that was me. And so while I might send a kid home, I would sleep on it and then call the parent the next day after I'd had a chance to get myself together. And sometimes I would tell the parent, I am very angry right now. This completely disrupted the school day, but because I'm angry, I need to follow up with you tomorrow because I need to make a better decision than in the heightened state of anger.
And parents appreciate that. That's right.
Yeah, they do.
And I want the parent to know that, what your child did, regardless of what the consequence is going to be, disrupted this entire school today. And when you disrupt learning, that's why I was a little uncomfortable about this topic today, because I don't want to ever I don't condone anything goes kind of environment. I mean, we need schools to look and feel like schools, and we need teachers to teach, and we need kids to learn, and we need to correct behaviors when they're inappropriate. But this churn of 10 days, 10 days, 10 days is not the way to do it. And I have said to my APs over all these years, I said, at any given moment in time, they could take us. We have to get them. We have to get them to choose
That's
not
funny.
to.
Right.
Yeah, because there are more of them.
Speak for yourself. I bet know me every time.
We're going to close it out with comments from each one of you. And the closing question for you is, I know all the principals in this room. I know them to all be restorative in their practices. And I think that's what we would like to see modeled in the nation, for all of you watching all over the nation. And certainly those in Dayton Public Schools. So I know you're restorative in nature. What would your advice be as it relates to punishment, the ultimate power, suspension, to a first-year principal? What would you advise them as they walk into that role?
I would advise them to do what many people said today. The first thing is recognize that as a principal, you're going to make up to 300 decisions a day, and they're going to be on the fly. Some decisions are way more important than others. The decision whether or not to suspend is one of your most important decisions you're going to have to make. As Ms. Dooley just described, don't make it out of anger. Don't make it in haste. If you're not thinking clearly, you can always say, Mom, Dad, they're going to be home for a day while I investigate. Give yourself time to investigate. When people make rash decisions on suspensions, that's when usually we have to come back. We may have to pull it back and apologize. And don't be afraid to apologize to a parent if you made a mistake with an investigation, because they're not always as clean cut. So don't beat yourself up for that. But make sure you give yourself time to try to make the best decision for that student. Make sure you have a reentry plan when you have to suspend, so that relationship between whoever the staff member and the student, or whoever it was, the two students, whoever was offended, that can be healed. And that'll be the key to transforming the culture, because the child will then authentically be able to take ownership of what they've done. And that's what changes and saves lives.
Your question again?
What would you say to a first-year principal?
Really do some self-reflecting in terms of what they believe about kids and learning, and what is the priority. Do we want kids here? Do we want it, do we want consequences to be consequential, or do we want them to be punitive? So, consequential is that, okay, we addressed it. We're not just ignoring it, but we dealt with it, but I learned from it, and I hopefully won't do it again, versus punitive. We know the research says nothing about punitive changing behavior. And recidivism is increased. I took 10. I stood tall and took 10. Give me 10 more. I'm going to I'm gonna earn these 10. So
Right. You're gonna give me 10 anyway.
I'm gonna earn these. Give me 10 more. I'm gonna earn them. So
After that
I
first
just
10,
think it's about that human. I think the human piece of connecting. That kids in high school don't want to they don't want to disappoint people they care about.
Right.
I'm so disappointed. It's so much more powerful than I'm pissed at you. Mm-hmm. To a new principal.
My thoughts are making a decision to suspend is very hard, and it should be, because you are taking away an opportunity for a student to be at school learning. And so it shouldn't be taken lightly. The other piece of that is, no matter what, whether your decision is to suspend or not, does that classroom need supports? Does that teacher need supports? Does that student need supports?
Is that lunchroom?
Right, does that lunchroom or that area? And principals, I say, look at your data. Look at your discipline data. Where is it happening? When is it happening?
what time?
Is it something that you can address with scheduling, with additional staffing locations for duties or whatever it might be, that may be able to be proactive rather than reactive.
I think for new principals, I think it's really important to have a progressive discipline plan. Sometimes they can be really complicated and convoluted, and things don't always, work as planned. But to have some preliminary steps and some alternatives. I mean, everybody wants a chance to recover and repair. Just like we said in the last podcast about retaking tests. Everybody can retake tests in the adult world. Everybody wants a chance to have an opportunity to fix what they've done wrong. And I'm a big proponent of Friday and Saturday schools. I'm a big proponent of community service. There are so many benefits that come out of those alternatives that I think really overall improve the climate of the school.
So I think to first-year principals, many of the things that my colleagues have said, but I will add, be thoughtful, be reflective. It's okay to make a mistake, and it's okay to apologize for your mistake because you're going to make them. You're a first-year principal. Be thoughtful about the suspensions you may make. But when you make a mistake, and I'm going to use that word intentionally, when you make a mistake, show kids and show their families that you're willing to make it right as well.
I definitely think a first year should have a progressive discipline plan. But one thing to add to that, I would say do not be afraid to have courageous conversations with adults. A lot of times when you look at suspending kids, it started with adult behaviors, and do not be afraid to call it out.
Wow.
There's nothing else to say. I'll just touch on what everybody else already said, right?
That was a joke.
So, I'm literally about to say what everybody said. Be intentional. Be intentional about establishing relationships with students. I think that if we don't have relationships with kids, it's so easy to just 10 days here, 10 days here, 10 days. Try to understand who they are. Try to connect, right? The other one is that suspensions don't. I'm not even gonna use it. Suspensions don't change behaviors, which was stated earlier. And we're educators. That's what we do. And as a principal, we don't take our educator hat off. We teach. We educate. And so if they're not in the building, we can't educate them. We can't teach them. And we often send them back to the environments where the social skills weren't taught explicitly or implicitly. So, yeah, that's it.
I'll just close by saying, after you've taken all the preventive measures that all of my colleagues who are sitting at this table who are principals have taken, put all the plans together, I'll just add with, at the conference, which is critical, make sure you listen, make sure you write, make sure that you show compassion for that action itself at the conference with the parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or whoever's representing that child. And also, if you're in your first year, I'll briefly tell this story. Home visits with your SRO work. I did a lot of them before I started at Thurgood. Set the tone for how we were going to operate. We did them in the summertime. And David Johnson and I went to homes, almost 40 of them, as I recall, maybe more actually. And they were conversations that were in parents' living rooms. It just said, we care about you, and that's why we're here today. We do not want a repeat of what happened the year before. And the final thing was, if it's a repeat, I know where you live. That's it for this week's podcast, Suspensions, the Ultimate Power to Remove a Child. I appreciate everybody. We're out.